The Vellani homeworld burned under a crimson sky. Massive black ships hung in the atmosphere like giant metal vultures, raining destruction on cities that had stood for thousands of years. Children cried in the streets as buildings collapsed around them. Families ran for shelter that no longer existed. The peaceful Vellani had never seen war like this. In the deepest underground laboratory, old scientist Killenor worked frantically at the ancient quantum relay. His blue hands shook as he typed the final commands. This machine had not been used for centuries, but it was their only hope now. The Korthax Empire showed no mercy to anyone who surrendered. "Please," Killenor whispered as he activated the device. "Someone out there must care." The signal shot out across the galaxy at impossible speeds, carrying a simple message. "Help us. We are dying. Our children are dying. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help." The message reached 20 different worlds within hours. On most planets, the signal was detected, filed away, and forgotten. Another dying civilization. Another tragedy in a galaxy full of them. Most species had learned to ignore such calls. Getting involved meant risk. Risk meant trouble. Better to stay safe and pretend nothing was happening. But on Luna Station, orbiting Earth's moon, communications officer Mingy sat at her workstation during the night shift. She had been monitoring deep space signals for 3 years. Most nights were quiet and boring. She drank coffee and read reports from other stations. Tonight felt different. The Vellani signal came through at 2:47 a.m. station time. At first it seemed like background noise, but Minji noticed something strange in the data patterns. She ran the signal through different filters and enhancement programs. What she found made her blood run cold. Hidden in the mathematical sequences were precise star coordinates, fleet movement patterns, population numbers, and something else that made her hands tremble. Recordings of actual voices, Vellani voices crying for help, children screaming, parents calling out names of missing family members. This was not just a distress signal. This was the death cry of an entire species. Mingy immediately forwarded everything to Admiral Jinho, the tough Korean commander who led humanity's deep space defense forces. Jinho had survived 3 different alien conflicts and never backed down from a fight. If anyone would care about this signal, it would be him. "Sir, they're asking for help," Minji reported when she called Jinho's private line. Admiral Jinho studied the data on his personal screen for nearly an hour. The recordings of Vellani voices broke his heart. He had children of his own. He could not imagine watching them suffer while the galaxy looked away. "How many other civilizations received this transmission?" he asked. 23 confirmed, sir. All advanced species, with military capabilities. Any responses? None, sir. Complete silence from everyone. Jinho closed his eyes and thought of his own family back on Earth. What if humans were the ones being slaughtered? What if they sent out desperate calls for help and nobody came? The answer came to him immediately. Someone had to act. Someone had to care. If the galaxy would not help the Vellani, then humanity would stand alone. The massive crystal spire of Nexus Prime floated in deep space, its transparent walls reflecting the light of distant stars. Inside the main chamber, delegates from 47 different species sat around a circular table that stretched nearly 100 meters across. This was supposed to be the most important governing body in the galaxy. Today, it looked more like a circus. Representative Hunwoo stood at the central podium, holding a datapad with the Vellani distress signal. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 5 years. In that time, he had seen the Council make many difficult decisions, but he had never seen anything like this level of cowardice. "Fellow delegates," Hunwoo began, "we have received a desperate plea for help from the Vellani people. Their entire civilization is being destroyed as we speak. Millions of innocent beings are dying right now while we sit here talking." The Seth delegate raised his scaled hand. The reptilian creature's yellow eyes gleamed with cold calculation. "Ambassador Yumu, You must understand the legal complexities here. The Korthax Empire filed proper salvage claims on all Villani territories. Their paperwork is completely in order. We cannot interfere with legitimate business operations. Hyunwoo stared at the snake-like alien in disbelief. Business operations? They're murdering children. That is an unfortunate side effect of the salvage process, the Seth replied calmly. But the law is the law. The Harmony Collective spoke, next through their crystal communication device. Their voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We must also consider the non-interference doctrine established in Council Resolution 447B. Direct military intervention violates our most sacred principles. We have spent centuries building a peaceful galaxy through diplomacy and understanding. What about understanding the Villani need to live? Hyunwoo shot back. The ethereal Zephyrian delegate floated slightly above his chair, his translucent body shimmering like heat waves. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Perhaps we should consider that the Villani's suffering serves a greater cosmic purpose. The universe has its own way of maintaining balance. Who are we to interfere with the natural order of things? Hyunwoo felt his anger rising. Natural order. The Korthax are using plasma bombs on refugee camps. How is that natural? Around the table, other delegates nodded along with various excuses. The Alturian representative worried about economic disruption. The Peaceful Federation claimed they needed more time to study the situation. The Crystal Minds suggested forming a committee to investigate. Enough. Hyunwoo slammed his fist on the podium so hard that several nearby delegates jumped in surprise. While you're making excuses and hiding behind your laws, real people are dying. Families are being torn apart. Children are watching their parents get killed. And you're sitting here talking about paperwork and cosmic balance. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the Seth delegate cleared his throat. Ambassador Hyunwoo, your emotional outburst is understandable, but inappropriate. We must make decisions based on logic and law, not feelings. Sometimes feelings matter more than laws, Hyunwoo replied quietly. The vote was called 30 minutes later. 43 delegates voted to send thoughts and prayers to the Villani people. 3 voted for economic sanctions that would take years to implement. Only 1 delegate voted for immediate military intervention. Hyunwoo stood alone as the council session ended. 46 species had chosen politics over lives. Once again, humanity would have to act without the galaxy's permission. Admiral Jinho walked slowly through the long corridors of Luna Command, his boots echoing against the metal floors. The walls around him told the story of humanity's bloodiest chapters. Black granite panels listed names from every major conflict Earth had ever known. The Korean War, World War II, the Rwandan genocide, the Syrian crisis. Millions of names carved into stone, each representing someone who had died while the world watched or looked away. He stopped in front of one particular panel and traced his finger along a familiar name. Kim Jinho, his grandfather, killed defending Seoul in 1950, when the world was too busy with its own problems to care about a small war in Asia. Below that, another name caught his eye. Park Minji, his grandmother, who had survived the massacre but carried the scars until her death. Grandmother always said the same thing, Jinho whispered to himself. When good people do nothing, evil wins. His father had told him stories about the old days, when small nations would send desperate messages to the United Nations, begging for help while their people were slaughtered. Most of the time, the big powers would send aid packages and peacekeepers months after the killing was finished. Sometimes they would impose sanctions that hurt ordinary citizens more than the killers. Very rarely, they would actually act in time to save lives. Jinho remembered his father's bitter words. The world always promises never again after the genocide is over, but somehow, it always happens again. Now, light years from Earth, the same pattern was repeating. The Villani were crying for help while 46 galactic civilizations found excuses to do nothing. History was not just repeating, it was expanding across the stars. "Soyang," Jinho called out as he reached the command center. Lieutenant Commander Soyang looked up from her workstation. She was one of the youngest officers ever promoted to such a high position, but Jinho trusted her judgment completely. Her family had also lost people to wars that the world ignored. "Yes, Admiral. Activate Protocol Omega. Full deployment." Soyang's face went pale. Protocol Omega was humanity's deepest secret, known only to a handful of military leaders. "Sir, that will expose our entire reserve fleet. Every ship we've built in the last 30 years. The galaxy will know we've been preparing for war this whole time." "Good," Jinho replied firmly. "Let them know. Send the message to all battle groups across the Sol system. We're going to war. But sir, the other species will think we're aggressive warmongers. They'll say we're just as bad as the Korthax." Jinho looked back at the memorial walls. "Soyang, do you know why we built those ships in secret? Why we kept training Marines and building weapons while everyone else was exploring peaceful planets? Because we're paranoid, sir? No. Because we remember what happens when good people have no way to fight back against evil. We built those ships hoping we would never need them, but we built them anyway, because hope is not a strategy." Within minutes, encrypted messages shot out across the solar system. On hidden bases around Jupiter, massive dreadnoughts powered up their engines. For the first time in decades, near Saturn, carrier ships launched fighters that had been in storage for years. Around Mars, cruisers and destroyers formed up into battle formations. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had never really stopped preparing for war. They had just learned to hide it better. Captain Ga stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought, never forgotten, watching as stars shifted from streaks of light back into points of brilliance. The hyperspace jump was complete. Around her, 66 other warships materialized from the void, like ghosts returning from the dead. These were not exploration vessels or science ships. Every single one had been built for war. The dreadnought, never forgotten, alone carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Its armor was 3 meters thick in some places. Its weapons could punch through space station shields like paper. This was humanity's secret shame and their greatest pride. A fleet designed to win wars they hoped would never come. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Dong Yun from the communications station. "We're receiving multiple signals from Korthax vessels. They're demanding we identify ourselves." Ga looked out at the Villani system through the main view screen. Even from this distance, she could see the glow of burning cities on the planet below. Massive Korthax ships hung in orbit like black daggers, pointed at the heart of a dying world. "Open a channel to the Korthax fleet," she ordered. The main screen flickered, showing the bridge of a Korthax command ship. The alien commander looked like a cross between a spider and a shark, with multiple arms and rows of sharp teeth. His black eyes showed no emotion except cruel amusement. "Unknown vessels." The Korthax commander spoke in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "You have entered a restricted salvage zone. Withdraw immediately, or face destruction. This is your only warning." Ga stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. She had trained for this moment her entire career, but she had never imagined it would feel so personal. Below them, innocent people were dying while this monster talked about salvage rights. "This is Captain Jige of the Terran Defense Force," she replied calmly. "We're here for the Villani survivors. Release them immediately, and withdraw your forces, or we will remove you by force." The Korthax commander's laughter sounded like breaking glass over the communication system. Behind him, other alien officers joined in the cruel sound. "Pathetic mammals. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I am War Commander, Vector of the Korthax Third Fleet. We have conquered 47 worlds. We have enslaved entire species. You face the might of an empire that has ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. GA felt her jaw tighten. She had heard bullies use similar words throughout human history. Different languages, different planets, but always the same arrogance. Always the same belief that might made right. We face bullies, she replied quietly, and humanity has a long history of dealing with bullies. She turned to her weapons officer, Commander Young-ho. Target their flagship. All ships, this is Captain GA. The Korthax have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing from Vellani space. If they refuse, we will consider that a declaration of war. You cannot be serious, Nek snarled. Your tiny fleet against our armada? We outnumber you 3-1. Numbers don't win wars, GA said, and cut the communication. Fire. The human war fleet opened fire as one, and the galaxy learned why Earth had never stopped building weapons of war. The Battle of Vellani Prime began at exactly 3:47 a.m. Earth time. In the black void of space, human fighters launched from their carrier ships like angry wasps defending their hive. Commander Minho led the first attack wave in his sleek Raptor fighter, diving straight into the heart of the Korthax formation. Eagle. Squadron, follow my lead, Minho radioed to his pilots. Stay tight and watch each other's backs. These alien ships are bigger than ours, but they're slow. Use that against them. The Korthax had never seen fighters move like this before. Human pilots flew with a reckless courage that bordered on insanity. They twisted between massive enemy ships, firing at weak spots and engine clusters. When Korthax gunners tried to target them, the small human craft would disappear behind asteroids or friendly ships, only to reappear somewhere else entirely. Min fighter danced through laser fire like it was raindrops. He had been flying since he was 16 years old, first in atmosphere on Earth, then in the vacuum of space around Mars. Every human pilot trained for this moment, the day they might have to fight for more than just their own lives. Target the bridge sections, Minho ordered. Take out their command centers, and they'll panic. But the Korthax were learning to adapt. Heavy cruisers began focusing their fire on single human fighters, overwhelming them with sheer firepower. Minho watched 3 of his pilots get vaporized in brilliant flashes of light. Then his own ship took a direct hit. Warning alarms screamed in his cockpit. His engines were failing, life support was dropping, and his weapons were offline. Standard procedure was to eject and hope for rescue. But Minho looked at his target, the massive Korthax flagship, or war commander. Vector was coordinating the genocide below. This is for the Vellani children, he whispered, and aimed his dying fighter directly at the enemy bridge. The impact sent shockwaves through the Korthax fleet. Their flagship was crippled, its command center destroyed. Suddenly, the coordinated enemy attacks became confused and scattered. Meanwhile, Colonel Nari led her Marines in the most dangerous mission of all, boarding enemy ships in the vacuum of space. Her soldiers wore heavy combat suits and carried weapons designed to work in zero gravity. They cut through enemy hulls with plasma torches and fought room by room through alien corridors. The Korthax had never faced borders like this. Human Marines moved like they were born for close combat. When aliens tried to surrender, Nari remembered the burning cities on the planet below. She remembered the recordings of Vellani children crying for help that would never come. No quarter. She transmitted to all her units. These monsters showed no mercy to civilians. We show none to them. Her Marines understood. This was not a war for territory or resources. This was justice for genocide. Every human fighter and Marine carried the same burning anger. They were fighting for people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. The Korthax began to realize they were facing something they had never encountered before, an enemy that fought not for conquest, but for principle. Major Taiho sat in the communications center of the command ship Righteous Fury, surrounded by screens showing data from across the battlefield, while other officers coordinated physical attacks. Taiho fought a different kind of war, one that attacked the enemy's mind and spirit. "Sir, we've successfully hacked into the Korthak's communication networks," reported Sergeant Wujin from his workstation. "We can broadcast to their entire fleet." Taiho nodded grimly. "Begin Operation Nightmare. I want every Korthak soldier to understand exactly what they're facing." Human technicians had recorded everything during the battle. The screams of dying Korthak's crew members, footage of their ships exploding, messages intercepted from families back home who would never see their loved ones again. Now those recordings flooded every Korthak's communication channel. The psychological impact was immediate. Korthak soldiers who had spent years terrorizing peaceful civilizations suddenly heard their own people crying for help. They listened to their comrades' final words as human marines stormed their ships. They watched their mighty war vessels burn like paper in space. "Turn it off," demanded Fleet Commander Vexkar over an emergency channel to the human fleet. "This is barbaric. This violates every rule of civilized warfare." Taiho opened a direct line to the Korthak's commander. His voice was ice cold when he replied, "This is what happens when you murder children. You wanted to show the galaxy how powerful you are by slaughtering innocents. Now we're showing them how you die." The Korthaks had never faced psychological warfare like this. For generations, they had been the ones spreading fear and terror. They would broadcast the destruction of peaceful worlds to intimidate other species into surrender. Now, the tables were turned, and they discovered they could not handle being on the receiving end. But Taiho's campaign went deeper than just fear. Human intelligence officers began broadcasting intercepted Korthak's communications that revealed corruption in their military ranks. Soldiers learned that their commanders had been stealing supplies meant for them. Lower-ranking troops discovered that high-ranking officers had been lying about casualty numbers to save their own careers. "We're turning them against each other," explained Captain Sunmi from the Intelligence Division. "Every species has internal conflicts. We're just making those conflicts impossible to ignore." Other galactic civilizations watched these tactics with a mixture of horror and fascination. The Peaceful Harmony Collective called it psychological brutality. The honor-bound warrior clans declared it fighting without dignity. The logical crystal minds calculated it as emotionally inefficient. But humans had learned a different lesson from their bloody history. When facing an enemy that showed no mercy to civilians, you used every weapon available to stop them as quickly as possible. Honor codes were luxuries that peaceful people could afford. When genocide was happening, the only moral choice was to win by any means necessary. Sir Wujin reported, "We're detecting massive communication breakdowns in the Korthak's fleet. Some ships are refusing orders from their commanders. Others are demanding to know why they weren't told about the casualties from previous battles." Taiho allowed himself a small smile. Fear is a powerful weapon, but doubt is even more effective. When soldiers stop trusting their leaders, armies fall apart. The galaxy was learning that humans fought wars differently than everyone else. While other species worried about honor and rules, humans focused on one simple goal: making evil stop as quickly as possible, no matter what it took. The liberated Vellani colony ship Hope's Dawn drifted slowly through space, its hull scarred by Korthak's weapons, but still intact. Inside the main meeting chamber, Admiral Jinho sat across from Elder Quinter, one of the few surviving Vellani leaders. The old alien's blue skin was marked with deep lines of grief, and his large eyes held the weight of unimaginable loss. Commander Yutna, Jinho's intelligence chief, operated the translation device that allowed them to communicate. The technology was necessary because the Vellani had never expected to need military translators. They had been a completely peaceful species for over 2,000 years. Elder Quinter Jinho said gently, "We need to understand what happened here. How long have the Korthaks been attacking your people?" The old Vellani's voice came through the translator as a soft, musical tone filled with sadness. "This attack began 3 months ago, but the Korthaks, they have done this many times before. They are like a plague that moves from world to world, consuming everything. Yuna leaned forward, her notebook ready. How many times before? 47 worlds, Quinta replied, and the number hit the humans like a physical blow. We know because we keep records. The Galactic Council keeps records too. They know exactly what the Korthax do, how they operate, who they target next. Admiral Jinho felt his blood run cold. The Council knows, and they do nothing. Worse than nothing, Quinter continued. They have a system. The Korthax always follow the same pattern. They study peaceful species for years. They learn our defenses, our cultures, our weaknesses. Then they file legal paperwork, claiming our worlds for salvage operations. The Council reviews the paperwork, and always finds it acceptable, Commander. Yuna's hands were shaking as she took notes. Elder, how many people have died while the galaxy watched? The old alien was quiet for a long moment, accessing data files on his personal device. The Althari civilization, 60 billion people, extinct. The gentle ones of Seraph, 15 billion, gone forever. The crystal singers of Melodia, 30 billion. Their music will never be heard again. He continued reading names and numbers that blurred together into an ocean of death. Entire species that had created art, music, literature, and philosophy. Civilizations that had contributed knowledge and beauty to the galaxy. All of them murdered, while the Galactic Council filed paperwork and held meetings. The Council calls it unfortunate but legal, Quinter said bitterly. They say interfering would violate galactic law. But there is no law against genocide if you fill out the right forms first. Admiral Jinho stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Each point of light might represent a world where innocent people had died while politicians made excuses. How long has this been going on? 700 years, Quinter answered. The Korthax have perfected the art of legal genocide. They know exactly which species to target. Always the peaceful ones. Always the ones who believe in diplomacy over violence. They avoid aggressive species, because those might fight back effectively. Yuna closed her notebook, her face hard with anger. The Council set up a system that rewards mass murder and punishes peace. Jinho realized the horrible truth. Humanity was not just fighting to save the Vellani. They were fighting a war that had been raging for centuries while the galaxies. Leaders looked the other way. Billions had died because good people chose law over justice, procedure over action, politics over lives. Lieutenant Hannah sat at her monitoring station aboard the cruiser Unyielding, scanning enemy communications for useful intelligence. For the past 6 hours, she had been listening to routine Korthax military chatter, supply requests, status reports, tactical updates. Nothing unusual for a species engaged in what they called salvage operations. Then something changed. The communication channels went silent for nearly 10 minutes. When they came back online, Hannah heard something that made her stomach turn. War Marshal Victor was speaking directly to his entire fleet, his voice filled with cruel satisfaction. "Attention all Korthax forces," the alien commander announced. "These human mammals think they can intimidate us with their primitive tactics. Today, we show them the price of interfering with our operations. Begin the demonstration broadcasts immediately." Hannah's hands flew over her controls, trying to decode what demonstration broadcasts meant. Within minutes, she had her answer, and it was worse than anything she could have imagined. The Korthax were broadcasting live executions of captured Vellani civilians, not soldiers, not military personnel, families, children, elderly people who could barely walk. They were being killed slowly and deliberately while Korthax soldiers forced them to speak messages of surrender, directed at the human fleet. "Please." An elderly Vellani grandfather begged through the translation device before a Korthax weapon ended his life. "Tell the humans to go away. We are not worth dying for." Hannah watched in horror as the broadcasts continued. A Vellani mother clutching her young child. A group of teenagers who had probably never seen violence before this war. Scientists and teachers and artists, all being murdered for the cameras while their killers laughed. "Sir," Hannah called out to Captain Yi-hoon, her voice cracking with emotion. "Emergency communication needed with Admiral Jinho, Priority Alpha." Within seconds, Admiral Jinho's face appeared on her screen. He could see the tears in Hannah's eyes and the rage building behind them. "Lieutenant, what's your report?" "Sir, they're broadcasting the murders, live. The Korthaks are executing Vellani civilians and forcing us to watch. They want us to see families being torn apart. They're trying to break our morale by making us watch innocents die." Admiral Jinho's jaw tightened as Hannah forwarded the intercepted broadcasts to his command ship. For several long moments, he watched in silence as the displayed their cruelty for the galaxy to see. But something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking human morale, the broadcasts ignited something much more dangerous. Across the human fleet, soldiers and officers watched the same horrific scenes. These were people who had grown up hearing stories about humanity's darkest chapters. They had been trained to fight with discipline and honor, but what they saw now pushed them beyond the limits of civilized warfare. Admiral Jinho opened a fleet-wide communication channel. His voice was steady, but everyone who knew him could hear the cold fury underneath. "All forces, this is Admiral Jinho. New rules of engagement are now in effect. The enemy has chosen to murder civilians for propaganda. They have shown us who they really are." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "No prisoners, no mercy. Hunt them all." The message spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Captains who had been following standard military protocols suddenly found themselves commanding crews that wanted blood. Marines who had been taking prisoners now sealed enemy airlocks and watched alien soldiers suffocate in space. Fighter pilots who had been targeting military systems began targeting escape pods and life support systems. War Marshal Victor had made a critical miscalculation. He thought showing humans the consequences of defying the Korthaks would make them retreat like other species had done before. Instead, he had awakened something primal in the human psyche, the same instinct that had driven their ancestors to fight to the death, defending their families and homes. The galaxy was about to learn why making humans watch children die was the worst possible strategy. 6 months after the Battle of Vellani Prime, the Korthaks Empire existed only in history books and nightmares. Captain Sunho guided his destroyer Final Justice through the empty space of the Coraxis system, hunting the last remnants of a once mighty war machine. His mission was simple but absolute. Find every single Korthaks vessel that had escaped the main battle and ensure they could never threaten innocent people again. "Contact on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Kyung-soo from the scanning station. 3 Korthak ships hiding in the asteroid belt. They're running silent, but their heat signatures give them away. Sunho nodded grimly. These were the cowards who had fled when their empires started falling apart. They had probably hoped to hide until humans lost interest and went home. They were about to learn that humans had very long memories. "Target all 3 vessels," Sunho ordered. "No warning shots. No surrender offers. End them." The human fleet had been methodical in their hunt. Every Korthak's base, every supply depot, every hidden outpost had been found and destroyed. Ships that tried to surrender were reminded of the burning Vellani cities and the murdered civilians. The galaxy had spent 700 years watching genocide happen while filing paperwork. Humanity decided that some crimes were beyond forgiveness. Meanwhile, back on Nexus Prime, the once mighty Galactic Council was holding its final session. The great crystal chamber that had housed delegates from 47 species now echoed with shame and recrimination. Most of the member worlds had already withdrawn their representatives. The few who remained sat in awkward silence. knowing their political careers were over. The Seth delegate, who had once spoken so confidently about legal salvage operations, now faced angry mobs on his homeworld calling for his exile. The Harmony Collective found their crystal networks flooded with messages of rage from their own people. Even the ethereal Zephyrians discovered that cosmic balance was a poor excuse when your own citizens demanded action. Admiral Jin-Ho, now promoted to Supreme Commander of the newly formed Terran Defense Compact, stood in what had once been the council chambers. Beside him were Ambassador Ga and Elder Quinter, who had become the voice of all the species that had suffered under Korthak's rule. The old system failed, Jin-Ho said simply, addressing the empty seats where cowardly delegates once sat. For 700 years, evil thrived because good people chose politics over action. That ends today. Elder Quinter activated a holographic display showing 47 star systems, every world the Korthaks had destroyed while the Council watched. These civilizations trusted the galaxy to protect them. They believed in diplomacy and law and justice. They died waiting for help that never came. Ambassador Ga read from a datapad listing the new members of the Terran Defense Compact. 43 civilizations have requested membership in the past week. Species who were once afraid to defend themselves are now asking humans to teach them how to fight. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Peace was not maintained by noble speeches and legal documents. Sometimes it required people willing to do terrible things to terrible people. Sometimes it needed guardians who would choose justice over law, action over debate, protection over politics. As human fleets began their journey back to Earth, they carried with them a heavy burden. They were no longer just another species among many. They had become the galaxy's protectors, whether other civilizations wanted them or not. The universe had tried self-governance and failed. Now it would learn what happened when humans took responsibility for keeping the peace. Never again would genocide hide behind paperwork while good people did nothing.